Of course, I wanted to start by thanking Justin and the AJC and the JCRC for bringing me here, and everybody who's here. It's great to see you. We do have a lot to cover. I've found in this week and a half where I was supposed to be speaking exclusively about this book and the Mossad in Iran, that the transition works better if I start with Israeli intelligence succeeding. In this book, Israeli intelligence succeeded a lot, and then I move on to Israeli intelligence failing miserably, which is what happened on October 7th in terms of the current war with Gaza. There's, hopefully, sort of a happy end eventually at the end of the story. We'll get to that too. So I am going to start a little bit with this book. There is a connection between the two. The connection is Iran. So Hamas obviously is what everybody is talking about now because of the war with Gaza right now. But Hamas couldn't have done any of what it did without funding, logistics, and most importantly, training from Iran. The threat to Israel for the next 5 years, 10 years, 25 years is Iran. So that's definitely the connection between the two. What's unique about the book, the most unique thing, is that usually if you read a Mossad book or a CIA book, it's about something that happened 50 years ago, 25 years ago. It takes that long to declassify things or for the people who did the operations to basically die out. In this book, we were able to get past the Israeli censor things that happened in 2023, 2022. 70% of the operations covered in this book are from 2018, 2020, and more recent. So this is extremely rare. How did this happen? So in 2018, wait, I'll do a little trivia quiz. Nobody's gotten this on the entire tour, so if nobody gets it, don't feel bad. There was a major event that happened that changed the Middle East and Israel-Iran-US relations on January 31st, 2018. Anybody know what it was? All right, the second one more people get. Has anyone heard of Israel stealing or permanently borrowing Iran's nuclear secrets? There you go. All right, more heads nodding. Okay, well that was on January 31st, 2018. So when I come back in 5 years and I ask you again, you'll know the answer. That changed everything. 3 months later, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu decides he's going to tell the entire world. Normally what would happen when you get those kinds of secrets is the Mossad would share it with the CIA, they'd share it with MI6 in England, they'd share it with the UN International Nuclear Inspectors, the IAEA. The general public wouldn't know. We'd find out 25 years or 50 years later. And Netanyahu decided to announce it to the world. Why did he decide to announce it to the world? It's a controversy. A lot of ex-Mossad people were very upset about it. But basically it was to achieve certain policy goals. One, to help turn the United States further against the Iran nuclear deal at the time. And that has only gone so far, but something that's lasted up until today is the IAEA, the UN nuclear inspectors, were given evidence that they couldn't ignore about Iran trying to pursue nuclear weapons as a military matter, not just civilian matter. And their probes into that are open until this day. And so if in 2018, the IAEA and Iran were sort of like best friends and getting along great, since then the IAEA has put tremendous pressure on Iran. And to the extent there were probably points where they would have gone back into a deal, but Iran's conditions were drop these probes. And the IAEA said, we can't. The evidence that the Mossad brought is too powerful. Briefly, I'm going to just tell one quick story, pieces of how it happened. You want the full story, you can get the book. But basically, a couple of amazing facts about how they pulled this off. So first of all, they carefully studied exactly, all of the different security systems. If anybody's here seen the Ocean's 11 movie, because I can't tell you everything I know, but basically you imagine hacking into the security feed, so that people are seeing something different than what's actually happening, turning off the sensors. There was a woman who wore a different kind of outfit and hijab, every single day for like a week, and she'd sort of walk around taking pictures with her bag like this, and nobody knew that she was just, they thought she was just like a normal person and a different woman every day, but it was the same woman taking pictures of the security forces, so they knew exactly what time they were leaving, what time they were coming, when there were less people there. They knew that inside the secrets were in these special kinds of safes that you couldn't just open. And in order to cut them open, they needed flamethrowers that reached 3,600 degrees. So they practiced with these flamethrowers on the same kind of safes in another country to cut through them. And then basically once they get, how long, I won't give you too much more trivia, but how long do people think the Mossad spent there? If you think about the movies, somebody's breaking in somewhere, they're, all right, we have 2 minutes, 90 seconds, 60 seconds, 30 seconds before the authorities are going to be here, we have to get out. How long do people think they took to take the secrets? 5 minutes, 10 minutes? What? 3 hours? Getting closer. 6 hours and 29 minutes. They took their time. And then when they left, even though all of the secrets were on 2 trucks, they had several different trucks going in all sorts of different directions that all looked identical. Very hard to follow which is which. My favorite part, and I have to say, according to foreign sources, because I'm under the Israeli censor, the Mossad used Iranians themselves to smuggle the secrets out of the country. How did they do this? There's a border with Azerbaijan, and there's a big drug trade over there. And in the drug trade over in the border between Azerbaijan and Iran, they have a rule: don't ask, don't tell. So the Iranians themselves smuggled their own nuclear secrets out of the country, I have to say, according to foreign sources. So that's the brilliance of the Mossad. Now, that's in terms of the war on Iran, the stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. But really, I think what got Simon & Schuster, our publisher, into this book was the diplomacy side. Everybody knows the Mossad's good at assassinating people, the Mossad is good at spying, the Mossad making peace? Since when did the Mossad make peace? So actually, the Mossad has been working on peace for a very long time, for decades. Any country where Israel had some sort of interest with, even if they didn't have diplomatic relations, so the foreign ministry can't do that, the Mossad can. But it didn't come out into the open until recently. So the Abraham Accords happen in August to December 2020. All right, last trivia question, last one, I won't ask anymore. 4 countries signed the Abraham Accords. Who knows any of the 4 countries? Morocco, UAE, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan. This is a great group. This was that was by far the fastest in the entire country, the fastest. Most people only got 3 out of the 4. Yes, exactly, yeah. Well done, okay. So basically, people who read the 10 or 20 books about the Abraham Accords know that at the end of the day, the final accords were finished off by Ron Dermer for Israel, Yusuf Al-Otaiba, the ambassador for the UAE, and Jared Kushner and Avi Berkowitz for the United States. But all of this was set by the Mossad before it happened. I can give you one example. The Mossad chief Yossi Cohen, this book introduces Yossi Cohen to the world. He was the Mossad chief 2016 to 2021. So he's the Mossad chief during the operation we just talked about, stealing Iran's secrets. He was the Mossad chief when a number of Iranian nuclear and terrorist officials disappeared, fell off a building, got hit by a bolt of lightning, whatever you want. According to foreign sources, the Mossad did it. And he, in late 2017, he has a meeting with MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. He's the crown prince of Saudi Arabia. He's the one who runs the show. Very shortly after that meeting, the IDF chief of staff, Gadi Eisenkot, and Minister Yuval Steinitz announced to the world, Israel is sharing intelligence with the Saudis. This is the first time that a deep relationship between Israel and the Saudis is made public. For years, there have been some quiet things going on. But making it public, this happens right after the meeting with Yossi Cohen. There's some other great examples in the book. March 21st, 2020, people might remember there was something going on in the world at the time called COVID. And there's a whole story about how COVID actually unites Israel and the United Arab Emirates, and we even call it coronavirus diplomacy. Boosted some of the relations, was another helpful step getting towards the Abraham Accords. You can learn more about that in the book. All right, so that's all of the positive stuff from Israeli intelligence. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. So here's the transition part. We go from Iran, which is the major threat, to Hamas, which is the threat today. And I'm going to just start with, on a personal note, before I came here, some of the more recent visits that I did were to the northern border and the southern border. And there were rockets going over my head and explosions and all kinds of things, but the thing that really stayed with me was my visit to Be'eri. For those who don't know, Be'eri was one of the 22 villages which was invaded by Hamas, and one of the 3 or 4 where the slaughter was the worst. Not going to completely describe it. I wrote an article at the time called "The Carnage of Be'eri." The only word I could think of when I was there was carnage. The only sort of thing I had in my head was I remembered about 30 years earlier having been in Auschwitz. That's what it looked like to me. It was basically hell on earth, horrible sight. The only reason I'm glad that I went there is that I can be a witness. And so when people say, Hamas is okay, which apparently there's some people out there who say this, I can say, no, I was there and I saw what Hamas did. It's not a doctored video. There aren't doctored photos. It's real. I saw it with my own eyes. So I can bring that to you. And we'll talk about, we're going to do a little bit of the geopolitical stuff, what happened with Hamas, what was the intelligence failure, what happened since the intelligence failure, what's going on with the invasion, a little bit what the end game is going to be. But we'll talk a little bit also, and you can feel free to ask more about what does this also mean for American Jewry, because it's having an impact. Some of the people we were talking about before in campuses, it's having an impact in communities. Anti-Semitism is going through the roof. So we can talk about that too. The intelligence failure, I'm going to divide it into, I said I wasn't going to take this off, but I need to walk around a little bit more. Can I get out? Okay, there we go. So the intelligence failure, the first piece is strategic. And what does that mean? Israel is really that much more powerful than Hamas. It's not even a close call. Israel is tremendously more powerful than Hamas, tremendously more advanced in technology. So how could it be possible that Israel could be so good against Iran, so much more powerful than Hamas, and not see October 7th coming? Because Israel knew it was so powerful. Israel got arrogant. There was hubris in the top levels, and everybody said Hamas would never dare to attack us. Never. So that's the strategic inability to read signals. There were a variety of warnings. There was a warning actually that went to the head of the Shin Bet, and he said, this could be serious. We need to send 10 more people as reinforcements to the border. 10 more people wasn't going to make a difference. They needed to send 10,000 soldiers to the border. That would have made a difference. And I'm not zeroing in just on the Shin Bet chief. This was across the board. This was a security theory that Netanyahu also had for most of his term as prime minister, that Hamas could be deterred, Hamas wouldn't try to invade Israel. So this was, a combination of arrogance, hubris. In fairness to all of the top defense officials, these are really bright, I've met all of them, brilliant people. And in fairness, the empirical evidence supported the idea that Hamas was deterred. So people in the world think that maybe this is like the first war. Maybe they might know that Hamas and Israel fought a war for 11 days in May 2021, but probably only some people in this room might know that actually there were about half a dozen rounds in between May 2021 and now with Islamic Jihad. Right? Islamic Jihad is the second terror group, the most powerful terror group in Gaza. And there were several rounds where just Islamic Jihad was shooting rockets, Hamas stayed out of it. Not 1 or 2 times, about half a dozen times. And the logical conclusion from that is Hamas is deterred. Hamas is afraid. In fact, within Gaza, Hamas took a hit. A lot of Gazans were saying, Hamas, you're not that tough. You're cowards. Islamic Jihad, they're the real men in Gaza these days. So Hamas took a hit, and the logical conclusion was Hamas was deterred. But when you're in charge of national security, you can't make policy just based on what the most likely conclusion is. You have to think about, what about the 10% scenario? What about the 5% scenario? And because of the arrogance, because Israel, we knew we were so much more powerful, we didn't do that. That was the strategic failure. That wouldn't have been enough. There were a series of tactical failures, and at this point, what Hamas did was monstrous, but from a military perspective, it was brilliant. The synchronization that they did, and I'll throw it all out to you, they basically start off firing about 2,000 rockets all at once. They had never done anything like this. Nobody had done anything like that in Israel. Basically, to give you a perspective, for the last few weeks since that first day, since the first couple hours, they're only shooting about 50 to 100 rockets a day. By the way, if you're in a debate with somebody and they're saying, Israel is so bad, nothing's happening to them, you can say, well, you know, they're only shooting 50 to 100 rockets at Israel per day. And then we're like, wait a second, what if they were shooting 50 to 100 rockets at you? Okay? The idea that in Israel we're like, oh, it's only 50 to 100 rockets a day, there's a problem with that. That's what Israel is living with. So anyway, they shoot 2,000 rockets all at once. So the Israeli military is thinking, oh my God, this is the most rockets we've ever seen. We're under a massive rocket attack. That's the focus, the rocket attack. At the same time as they fire all the rockets, they send about 36 drones to kamikaze to crash into Israel's advanced sensors and Israel's lookout points. At the same time that they do that with the drones, Israel, by the way, knew about the drones, but they didn't expect that they would do a swarm of that many all at once. At the same time that that happens, they use retro technology, motorized hang gliders. If you Google motorized hang gliders in Gaza, you will find nothing. Maybe you'll find one article. Nobody had a clue about the motorized hang gliders, and I kid you not, you can see videos of them going or flying around in these motorized hang gliders and manually dropping bombs on lookout points and sensors. And motorized hang gliders also don't show up very much on radar, very low footprint. So basically, at the same time that the Israeli military thinks that what does it need to worry about, this unprecedented rocket attack, they go blind. They no longer know what's going on the border, and they don't know that they're going blind because they're focused on the rockets. So at that moment, Hamas, a couple moments later, sends perfectly synchronized forces into two major crossing points. Suddenly the Israeli military is like, wait a second, we have an invasion in 2 points? But I thought the big issue was the rockets. As they're starting to think about those 2 points, Hamas invades in 27 other points all at the same time. Now the Israeli military is thinking, they can't be in all of these places at the same time. There must be some fake news here. Maybe people are confused. And that is basically what happened. And they're completely blind, and they don't see. We're talking about almost 3,000 Hamas fighters or terrorists, whatever you want to call them. And that is basically, all of that is happening at the same time. There are some other clever things that Hamas did. They knew that Israel was following them on one frequency, so on that frequency they acted as if they were very deterred and very intimidated. On a more retro frequency, they knew Israel wasn't bothering to listen because it was sort of retro, and they were having more conversations about that. The full scale of the invasion was a very closely held secret, but basically, tactically, they schooled Israel, and Israel wasn't looking at it because, again, they were not thinking that Hamas could be that dangerous. So that's the intelligence failure. But we rallied since then. The truth is, Israel is going to be fine in the end because we knocked Hamas out of the area within about 2 days. Within a few days after that, it was really cleaned out of Hamas people. And almost immediately, Israel started doing airstrikes. You have about 1,500 Hamas fighters, terrorists killed during the battles within Israel. At least a few thousand more have been killed by airstrikes, and then the invasion, which started about a week ago. So the invasion is sort of going slow motion. Why is it going slow motion? All kinds of reasons. Some of it's force protection. Fewer Israeli soldiers, they think fewer Israeli soldiers will die if they do it sort of in a very slow, coordinated fashion where they have air support from both drones and aircraft and artillery and tanks. Anytime Israeli forces are going through, mostly in armored personnel carriers, they think they will also kill fewer Palestinian civilians this way because they can do it in sort of a very controlled, thought out fashion. The United States wanted something sort of narrow like this so like it wouldn't sort of blow up all at once. There could be a price for this. The price could be, will Israel finish the job? Right? The job that was stated was topple Hamas, eliminate Hamas. So if a certain number of Palestinian civilians are killed, or if a certain number of Israeli soldiers are killed, in this process that goes slower, at some point the clock could run out. And if Israel hasn't finished the job, if they've killed 30% of Hamas fighters, right now let's say maybe they've only killed, 10%. There's wild estimates whether Hamas has 15,000 or 40,000 fighters. So we're nowhere near there. So that is something to keep an eye on. Will Israel be able to finish the job before the clock runs out? Let's say Israel does succeed in toppling Hamas. What happens next? So this is a big question. And I can tell you with almost absolute certainty that Israel does not know what it's going to do afterwards. It knows that it does not want to control Gaza. Very, very clear about that. I can't say who, but I was with a senior diplomatic source in a closed briefing with a few others, about as high as you can get. And the person was asked 5 different ways, what's the plan for afterwards? And as a veteran journalist, I can tell when somebody is evading you and they have an idea, and when somebody's evading you because they really don't know. So this was a really don't know scenario. Now, what theoretically makes sense? There could be the Palestinian Authority. They used to run Gaza, but they don't run Gaza today because Hamas toppled them and killed most of their soldiers. So would they really be able to manage it? There's the United Nations. If anybody knows the history of UNIFIL in Lebanon, so UNIFIL was supposed to prevent Hezbollah, the terror group in Lebanon, from rearming after the 2006 Second Lebanon War. At that point in time, Hezbollah had a couple tens of thousands of rockets. Today, with UNIFIL preventing them from rearming, they have 150,000 rockets. So the UN doesn't have such a great record in terms of preventing a terror group from rearming. There's, because you have an Arab coalition, the Arab countries in the region are always saying they really care a lot about the Palestinians. Would they finally come forward and actually do something for the Palestinians? I'm a little bit skeptical. Would the United States want to do some nation building again after Iraq and Afghanistan? Sort of unlikely. Some sort of Western allied coalition, a hybrid of all of the above. So maybe a hybrid works. Maybe Israel establishes a security zone in northern Gaza. Maybe Israel withdraws from most of Gaza but keeps some troops on the outskirts of certain cities. So if somebody shoots a rocket, they can follow them in hot pursuit. It's very unclear what's going to be. But the main thing is that Israeli officials said, and this they made it very clear, is even if Hamas or some jihadist group comes back, if they deal a huge blow to Hamas at this point, it could take them 10 years. And if that gets Israel 10 years of quiet, Israel has not been having 10 years of quiet. There have been round after round after round. So at the very least, this will really do a major surgery on the terror apparatus in Gaza and push things off for a longer period of time. There's other things to discuss. People can ask all kinds of questions about what about Hezbollah in the north? Is that going to blow up into another war? Recently, Yemen got involved and shot ballistic missiles and drones. What does all of that mean? Is Iran itself going to get directly involved? What is the impact of all of this on the Abraham Accords? I'm going to say a really quick thing about the Abraham Accords, but if people want to ask more, I'll talk more about it. The Abraham Accords that are already signed, as far as I'm concerned, they're locked in. There's certainly criticism from Israel's new Sunni Arab allies, but there are literally billions of dollars of trade going on between Israel and the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco. That's locked in. I was in the UAE. They don't actually care very much about the Palestinians. Nobody is going to like what's happening right now in the war. Who's an Arab, they're going to criticize Israel, but the war is going to end. They're going to want to go back to business. As far as they're concerned, they missed out on business with Israel for decades because they waited for the Palestinians, thinking the Palestinians would cut a deal. They get tired of waiting. What's going to happen with the Saudis? That's a separate question if people want to ask. I said I'd say something about anti-Semitism. Justin, knows the local issues even better than me, so he can give you even better advice. What I am saying in a national sense in the United States is we tend to encounter 2 different kinds of people who are at least worth being talked to. There are some people who just hate Israel, and you're not going to be able to convince them. But let's say you have somebody who doesn't know that much, and they're sort of coming at it from an emotional perspective. Just share with them the videos and the photos from October 7th. If people get familiar with the dismemberment and the rape and the killing of the women and the children and the elderly from October 7th, they are not going to be able to be on Hamas's side. They might still have criticism of Israel, but they are not going to be able to be on Hamas's side. They will see Hamas as an evil group, as an ISIS-style group. And if you see Hamas as an evil ISIS-style group, that already creates a certain amount of balance. Whether you love everything that Israel does, anybody, you can be a fan of Israel and still be critical of this piece or that piece, but they will not be on Hamas's side. They will not be able to be on Hamas's side. Now, if you have somebody who likes facts and likes context and is willing to learn and is a fair-minded person, Then you can give them a little bit of history, and the history goes like this. I mean, there's a longer history, but the more recent history goes like this. Israel was in Gaza for a very long time. Israel withdrew from all of Gaza in 2005. They withdrew from all of Gaza in 2005, every inch. They got rid of Israeli settlements that were in Gaza. It caused a huge split within Israel that the government got rid of certain Israeli settlements in the area, and they gave it all back. And basically since then, round after round after round, Hamas has been shooting rockets at Israel. There has not been a single time where Israel started with Gaza, where Israel started with Hamas. Every single time, it's Hamas shooting rockets, Hamas doing some sort of penetration. That's the history. And so what Israel is doing now, as of October 7th, he said, you know what, we tried for 15 years to hit Hamas a little bit anytime they went too far, but not too much. And we said, you know what, they're a terror group, but they're like not as bad a terror group, and we can deal with them. We'll let them control Gaza as long as, we'll just from time to time remind them, don't mess with us too much. October 7th said that didn't work. We tried it for 15 years. It's not that we just went in and invaded big time without trying alternatives. We tried alternatives. That's the picture with Gaza. The wider picture is, you go back, 2 Israeli prime ministers named Ehud Barak in 2000, Ehud Olmert in 2007, offered the Palestinians between 90 to eventually 94% of the West Bank, half of Jerusalem, arrangements related to the Temple Mount, and the deals were rejected. So it's not that Israel hasn't offered peace, it's not that Israel hasn't tried to give Gaza a chance. The invasion now is after lots of other things were tried, and this needs to be done because Hamas doesn't work.